The Adventures of Puss in Boots. Once upon a time, in a quiet village nestled amidst rolling hills and lush greenery, there lived a humble miller and his 3 sons. The miller toiled tirelessly at his mill, grinding grain to make a modest living for his family. Upon his deathbed, the miller summoned his sons to him to impart his final blessings. To his eldest son, he bestowed the mill, ensuring his livelihood would continue through the family trade. To the middle son, he left the faithful donkey that had served them well over the years. But to the youngest son, the one with dreams as big as the sky and a heart full of hope, he left nothing but his beloved cat, Puss. Now, the youngest son, though filled with love for his cat companion, couldn't help but feel disappointment at his meager inheritance. However, Puss saw an opportunity. He said to his master, "Do not worry, my dear master. If you provide me with a bag and a pair of boots, you will soon realize that having me by your side isn't as bad as you think." Having received the requested items, Puss donned the boots and headed to an area abundant with rabbits. He filled his bag with bran and greens, then lay down as if he was lifeless. Patiently, he waited for unsuspecting young rabbits to approach and peer into his bag. As soon as a young rabbit leaped into his bag, Puss promptly pulled the strings shut, seizing the rabbit. Pleased with his catch, he carried it to the palace and requested an audience with the king. Led upstairs to the king's chambers, he bowed respectfully and addressed him, "Your Majesty, I present to you a rabbit from my esteemed lord, Marquis Carabas." "Tell your master," said the king, "that I thank him, and that I am very pleased with his gift." Another time Puss went and hid himself in a grain field. He snared birds and even managed to trap a few plump pheasants with his cunning traps. He presented these to the king, as he had done before with the rabbit. The king received the gifts with great pleasure. For 2 months the cat continued to bring gifts to his majesty, explaining that these gifts were from his master, Marquis Carabas. One day, Puss learned that the king will be taking a drive along the riverside with his daughter, the most beautiful princess in the world. Puss said to his master, "If you follow my advice, your fortune is made. All you must do is to go and bathe yourself in the river at the place I show you, then leave the rest to me." Marquis Carabas did what the cat advised him to, without knowing why. While he was bathing, the king passed by, and the cat began to cry out, "Help! Help! My lord Marquis Carabas is drowning." When the king heard the commotion, he leaned out of the coach window and recognized the cat, who had always brought him good gifts. he ordered his guards to rush to help Marquis Carabas. As they rescued Marquis from the river, the cat approached the king's coach and explained that while his master was bathing, thieves had stolen his clothes. In reality, the clever cat had hidden the clothes beneath a large stone. The king quickly ordered his wardrobe officers to hurry and bring one of his finest suits for Marquis Carabas. The king welcomed Marquis Carabas warmly. Dressed in the king's splendid attire, Marquis Carabas appeared quite impressive, being handsome and well-built. This caught the eye of the king's daughter, who secretly began to feel fond of him. With just a few respectful and affectionate looks, the princess found herself deeply smitten with Marquis Carabas, and the king invited him to join them in the coach for their journey. Meanwhile, Puss dashed ahead of the coach. Encountering some farmers mowing a meadow, he addressed them, "Dear friends, if you don't inform the king that this meadow belongs to my master, Marquis Carabas, you'll be minced like meat." The king did not fail to ask the mowers about the ownership of the meadow they were working on. "It belongs to Marquis Carabas," they replied in unison, intimidated by the cat's warnings. Puss, still running ahead, encountered some other farmers and addressed them, "Dear friends, if you don't inform the king that all this grain belongs to Marquis Carabas, you'll be minced like meat." A moment later, the king passed by and inquired about the ownership of the grain being harvested. "It belongs to Marquis Carabas," responded the farmers, much to the delight of the king. Meanwhile, Puss continued on, repeating the same message to everyone he encountered. The king was amazed by the extensive estates of Marquis Carabas. Finally, Puss arrived at a grand castle, ruled by an ogre who was the wealthiest ever known. All the lands the king had recently passed through belonged to this castle. The cat, having made sure to learn about this ogre and his abilities, requested to speak with him, explaining that he couldn't pass by his castle without paying his respects to such a distinguished figure. When Puss met the ogre, he said, "I've heard that you possess the remarkable ability to transform into any creature you desire. For instance, you could become a lion, an elephant, or anything else you wish." "That's correct," replied the ogre eagerly. "And to prove it to you, I will now transform into a lion." The cat was utterly terrified at the sight of the lion that he scrambled onto the roof. Thankfully, the ogre reverted to his original form, and the cat cautiously descended, admitting that he had been thoroughly frightened. "I've also heard," said the cat, "that you can even change into the tiniest creatures, like a rat or a mouse. But I find that hard to believe. I must confess, I think it's impossible." "I've also heard," said the cat, that you can even change in. Impossible, exclaimed the ogre. You'll soon see. Without hesitation, the ogre transformed into a mouse and scurried across the floor. The cat wasted no time and swiftly ate the mouse. While the king observed the splendid castle of the ogre from afar, he became intrigued and decided to go inside. Puss, who heard the noise of the king's coach running over the drawbridge, ran out and said to the king, "Your Majesty, welcome to the castle of my lord Marquis Carabas." "Marquis," exclaimed the king, "does this castle also belong to you? There can be nothing grander than this courtyard and all these majestic buildings. Let us enter, if you please." Marquis offered his hand to the princess and followed the king, who led the way. They entered a grand hall where a lavish feast awaited them. The ogre had prepared it for his friends, who were supposed to visit him that day but were afraid to enter knowing that the king was there. The king was thoroughly impressed by Marquis Carabas, as was his daughter, who had developed strong feelings for him. Observing the extensive estate he owned, the king remarked to him, after a few glasses of wine, "It would be your own fault, Marquis, if you do not marry my daughter and become my son-in-law." Marquis expressed gratitude with numerous bows and accepted the honor bestowed upon him by the king. Without delay, on that very day, he married the princess. And so, with their fortunes forever changed by the daring exploits of a clever cat, they lived happily ever after, their names etched into the annals of history as legends of courage and cunning. The end.